a fantastic turnout. Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Natalie. I am the Adult Technical Services Librarian here at the library. I do not normally do programming, so bear with me. I'm a bit of a newbie here, but we're very excited to have the Bynum family with us today to talk about their experience in Goffstown. I do just want to do a couple of housekeeping things. First, exits are to the left here. There is an elevator, as most of you know, and there are stairs. The restrooms, the public restrooms are on the first floor. They're at the bottom of the stairs, or if you get off the elevator, the person at the front desk can direct you to the bathrooms. Yeah, if everyone is comfortable, I know we're at standing room only right now, so I apologize for that. But we're all comfy cozy in here. So, all right, without further ado, I will introduce the Bynum family. So the Bynum family is committed to their Goffstown community. Their father, E.B. Bynum, served as a Goffstown selectman, budget committee member, Charter Commission member, and Historic District Commissioner. You can read about this heritage in Legacy, Portrait of an Ancestor, by Edward Bruce Bynum, co-authored with sons Kenneth D. Bynum and Anthony A. Bynum. Their mother, Lily Mae Bynum, was featured in the May 12, 2016 New Hampshire Business Review for her 90th birthday. This summer, 2 of Edward and Lily Mae's 7 children will share some of their family stories and Goffstown history at this presentation today. So thank you so much for coming out. I'm going to hand it off.
Thank you, Natalie. Appreciate you.
Test the mic.
Okay, let's see here. Turn the mic on. Little feedback. Sound good? All right. Well, good morning. Good morning, Goffstown. These are exciting times in Goffstown, right? Exciting times. We want to thank the fine and honorable visitors here to the library today. Thank you for coming out. We know there's other things you could be doing. There's a marathon going on, so I'm sure that, you could be working out doing that if you wanted. My name is Anthony Ashley Bynum, but here in Goffstown I was always known as Tony. Let me first introduce you to my co-presenter, Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum. There'll be more information on Bruce as we continue from and about him as we continue on. We want to have a special thanks to the library for allowing this to happen. So it starts with the head librarian, Diane Hathaway, but also Carolyn Kenny. She worked with us the whole time. She is in a motherly way. She just delivered a little boy, I understand. So hopefully they're resting comfortably at the house. Today, Natalie's filling in. Thank you for stepping up to the plate on that for today's presentation. Now, prior to starting this, we want to acknowledge a few special guests. First, seated all the way to my right, sometimes in the military, you kind of really right, left, right. My right is my sister-in-law, Elise Bynum. Also, right here on my left side is my sister Carol. Now, Carol's contribution to the event, to this, will become more and more clear as we go forward with things. Okay. Also, I want to acknowledge my mom. Mom, would you mind standing up just for a second? History is actually a very, very simple thing if you break it down. No mom, no me, right? So today we want to take a look at both Goffstown history and Bynum legacy. Each started at some point in time. I'm honored to say that we can actually track down those questions. The town of Goffstown was incorporated in 1761. Now, if you don't believe me, you can just look at the hat. We trace the patriarch of the Bynum family to a place called Pitt County, North Carolina. Ashley Bynum, which is a name that stays in the family every generation. There's an Ashley, I'm an Ashley. was born into slavery in 1842. He married Anika Bynum when she was 36 years old. We know this based on the Pitt County Register of 1880. Again, my sister Carol many years ago did research back in the 70s, and she's the backbone of all this historical information. Okay, the town of Goffstown is named after Colonel John Goff. He was an early settler, soldier, and civic leader. We want to take a minute to look at the Goff family. According to public genealogy records, there were two Goffs before Colonel Goff. The first Goff, who's John, rather old John, came with his two brothers in either 1662 or 1663. The second Goff, who was a squire or who practiced the law, well, he was the second one, right? So he came after, right? He built a homestead in a place called Bowman Brook. And there's a historical marker on Route 3 near the Manchester line to establish where where the mill was. Okay. Now also, according to Goffstown history, regarding Goffstown history, it's important to note that during the King Philip's War of 1734, Goffstown and West Manchester were designated as Narragansett Number 4. As I recall, I think there's a beer company, Narragansett, is that right? Right. As a side note, New Hampshire was a bit of a banana republic during the Revolutionary War. See, it provided, the governor had access to all this great lumber, and the Royal Navy needed lumber for their ships. So he was, perhaps playing both sides. I don't know. Right. That's just a side note. Now, as we know from history, that the British Navy was the world's greatest navy until it was supplemented during World War II. So that's a long time on top. Okay, let's continue. The 1880 census noted 4 sons to Ashley and Anika. There was a Sanas, that's S-N-A-S, he was 13. Eddie was 11. Agrippa was 8. And Festus 2. It is Agrippa who we will focus on. So remember that name, Agrippa. In fact, Agrippa is actually a very, very old name. I've seen it in the Bible. So that tells you it goes way, way back. Goffstown is located at the 43rd North and 71st, I believe it's longitude or parallel, in a place called Hillsborough County. Hillsborough County is 9 miles away from Manchester. It's actually south of Concord. And it is north of Bedford, which is, I remember, was always the nicer place around. I was going to say where the rich folks lived, but I wasn't sure how that was going to go. In 2017, my brother Kenny excitedly told us of a Bynum family reunion to be held in Northern Virginia. I immediately asked if he knew if there was any blood relationship. He did not know. However, my sister Susan, my sister Carol, my brother Kenny, my nephew Blake, my sons Anton and Andre, they all went. And, they were nice people, nice folks there. But prior to going, I reached out to my mom. And I wanted to know, if she knew anything about this. Or if there was any family that I could contact about this. I don't want to fly blind, right? She gave me the number for my father's last living aunt, an Aunt Willie Mae out there in California, I think San Diego, as I remember. Now, I was unable to reach her, but I did talk to her granddaughter, who happens to be my cousin Rosie. She couldn't help me too much with the family history, but she gave me the number for one of my father's last cousins, a cousin A.H. Bradley of Texas. We spoke twice over the phone. He told me about his many great uncles and aunts. A.H. was a little younger than my father, but he remembered Agrippa, my father's grandfather. As a child, Agrippa would tell him about how he came to Arkansas. Probably pronounced Arkansas, but Arkansas nonetheless. He told them about sea cows, which he believed were humpback whales, and Sunday wagon rides by ox. So Pitt County is probably not that far from the coast. Now, Goffstown, like other New England towns, does not actually have a mayor. It has 3 elected officials called selectmen. My father, after working many years in the budget committee, ran for this office of selectman in 1982, and he won. You can see a couple of the pictures right there and back over here. of just some of the props we have at the table. All right, where was I? 1982. He joined John Surratt, who was a local, very successful local businessman who was in the auto repair and supply business, and also Bob Wheeler, who was a successful insurance agent. Now, it was Mr. Bob Wheeler who taught me the game of basketball. In fact, he coached me at the Villa Augustina 2 full years. 2 great years for me. I loved that whole experience. One of the best experiences of my entire life. Now, actually it was 3 years. Actually, it was 3 now I think about it. Because I played the first year, but it was Doc and JV show. The next year, in the 6th grade, our team went 0-10. We did not win a single game. Had a couple tough ones, but we didn't win any games. However, the next year, same guys, we went 10-0, and we won the championship. It was the Pee Wee League Championship. I don't know if they still do Pee Wee League basketball here or not. I don't know. He was the one who taught us a lesson. He said, you take a string of yarn, and it's easily broken. However, you take 5 strings, wove them and twist them, they become like steel. So that has stood with me my entire life, the whole idea of teamwork. It's always about the team, right? So let's continue. Agrippa told the young A.H. that the men in power in Pitt County were somewhat concerned about the large numbers of newly freed Americans. Or not Americans at that point, actually, but newly freed people. They were concerned. So a plot was created and a story was circulated that there was a place out west where land could be obtained cheaply, and if you were skilled, you could hunt all the pigs that you could get. Agrippa approached his mom and dad, Ashley and Anika, and he said, I need to make a name for myself. I need to travel to this land. So with his parents' blessing, they went. Okay? He settled there, he married, he raised a family, and his grandson would have one sister, her name Irma. That grandson was my dad. How do we know that Agrippa was successful? Well, during that 2017 Bynum family reunion, my brother Kenny looked up the 1900 Little Rock census records that my sister Carol had gotten many years before, and he found right there at the spot where a senior Ashley and a senior Anika were living with Agrippa. Okay, so that's where it starts for us. We only knew about Arkansas. I only knew about Arkansas. I didn't know anything about North Carolina. Okay, and just so you know, there's a reason why Arkansas is called the Razorback State. Now, from this point, I want to turn this over to my brother, Dr. Bruce Bynum. Bruce moved with the rest of the family to Goffstown in 1962, as my father was restationed to the positioned to the tracking station, okay, out there, the New Boston tracking station, which, by the way, I actually saw for the first time about 6 months ago. I'd always seen the sign for it, but I'd never actually been there. And it's not like you go on there, because it's still military, you know what I mean? But you can pass it, right? Bruce the Younger graduated from Goffstown High School in 1966. He went to the University of New Hampshire, which is in Durham, pursued an undergraduate degree in psychology. He did his graduate and doctoral work at Penn State. He's married to the former Elise Taub, now Elise, my sister-in-law, and he's the father of 2 sons, Ezra and Elijah. So Bruce has written a number of books, some of which he'll discuss today. So at this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to Bruce.
Okay, how's my voice back there? Good? All right, great. Well, again, welcome. I'm very, very, very glad to see so many people here today. Some I see occasionally when I come to Goffstown, but many of you swim in the last 50 years of my life in one way or another. And it's sort of interesting for me to sort of walk down the street occasionally, but also in this room, and I can see faces sort of float up that I know. And some I have a long, long history with, which I will get into. But anyway, as Tony indicated, we lived, well, you didn't, but the rest of us lived in Southern California in the Los Angeles area. And my experience in, can you hear me?
I don't think the mic is on. Mic's not on.
I want to make sure my voice is picked up there. How about that? Oh, it's got this volume thing. Anyway, as Tony said, I grew up with most of my siblings in Southern California, mostly Los Angeles area. And when I was growing up in Southern California, the world that I grew up, the environment I grew up was very, very, very different than Goffstown. I mean, like in school, I had all kinds of students in my class. We had kids of Mexican lineage, we had kids from Asia, we had African Americans, and I saw them all and interacted with them all, and I wasn't very self-conscious of it. But when I moved to New Hampshire, it was a radically different change for me. And like many of you can remember, 30, 40 years ago, it was very unusual to see an African American or a person of Latino descent here. And now it's relatively commonplace. So when we moved to New Hampshire, we were essentially the only African American family in New Hampshire. And I remember driving across the country through the southwest. We'd drive through New Mexico, Arizona, and I was blown out by the sunsets and the landscapes and the petrified forest to some extent. And then we drove all the way up here and we arrived in New Hampshire. And I was essentially blown away. I was a very impressionable kid in Southern California anyway, but this was very different for me. And one of the things that I remember very vividly, I was in the 9th grade and I was sitting in English class because we came up at the end of the fall. And I was sitting in English class and the window was open and it began to snow. And everybody else just kept listening to the teacher blithering on about whatever. But I was like, what is this? And I knew about snow, obviously. When I was a little kid, we lived in Spokane, Washington. But it had all been forgotten when I lived in Southern California. And now all of a sudden, this, bits and pieces of angels were flying out of the sky and on the windowsill. And I went over and I just got my hand in it and I just moved it around. And I was just sort of, wow, this is really, really different. So in Southern California, we had obviously, trees, plants, forests, trees and plants, and we had open fields occasionally in Los Angeles and Compton, California. But when I got to New Hampshire, there were massive trees. And, that may seem, commonplace to you, but for me, this was like, whoa. And then we our first landing was in Manchester. And if my memory serves me right, we drove out one of the highways and we stayed for a week or two while my father got settled in some place that it was associated with Indian Head Motel or something like that, as it sweeps up from my unconscious. That's what I remember. And we were there for a couple of weeks, and then eventually we were on the base in Manchester, which I'm not sure is even there anymore. And then eventually we moved to Goffstown, and up onto at that time it was called Pine Ridge. And we began a new experiment. And it took us a while to get used to it. Something as simple as buying gloves. I never needed to have gloves before. And I remember the first gloves that I had, I picked them out of the store because they looked nice, they were shiny. And I said, these look really nice. It turns out that these were shells. You were supposed to wear real gloves inside of them. So I remember my hands just freezing as I was walking to school. And I'm a 12, 13-year-old kid, trying to make sense of all of this. But anyway, that was our first experience, my first experience of it. And I was the oldest of 6. So I felt an immense responsibility to, one, make sure I knew all the rules and regulations of the new community that I was in, and two, to take care of my siblings. And so that weighed heavily on me, and I began in the 9th grade. And I did relatively well, so they promoted me to high school. And it was an old high school that has now been converted into a place where people have residences. But at that time, it was high school. And I spent 4 pretty good years there, and I was almost I was a student council president there. And then when I graduated and went to UNH, I continued my interest in a number of things. One of them was writing. And I'd done some tiny bit of writing when I was in Southern California. And, you know, we had a school newspaper at the Catholic school, St. Lawrence Church School. And but it was only in New Hampshire that I began to take an interest in it, and it dawned on me that this would be a way to actually express myself and to do something. So that continued on at UNH, and it was in UNH that the 2 oldest and deepest friendships, male friendships of my life were born. One was with Brad Cook, one of my oldest friends. Stand up, Brad. Brad Cook, and with Ernest Stableford. And we've remained friends for a good half century now. We get together every other year or so for a time in the wintertime, and we just sort of reminisce and try to remember what we used to be able to do. So I continued that. And then I was fortunate enough to get accepted into graduate school at Penn State, where I then went for 4 very, very, very good years, very different than UNH. And it's there that my writing, I began to take it much more seriously. And it began to diverge into 2 areas. One was in the area of writing about psychology, and the other was my other passion and interest, which is poetry. And I continued in both of those. And since that time, I've written 7 books, 6 solo, and 1 is a joint book in psychology, and 7 or so in poetry. And so I go back and forth, and my mind works that way. Oftentimes I'll have an idea that begins as an image, and then I translate that image over into psychological work, and then at the end of the psychological work, I turn it back over to poetry again. I'm not quite sure exactly how that works, but I brought some of those here today, and the library has, Tony and I have made sure that all of our work is here in the library because we want to be part of Goffstown history. That's very important to both of us. And what we do with it is different. You know, Tony's very involved politically and in terms of media in his own community. In fact, he has a television program that he works with. But we both continued that. Now, I talked about the environment being different, the earth being different. In fact, when we lived in Southern California, we had smaller trees, smaller bushes, but we had an airport about a mile from our house. And that was another thing that was very different. One last thing I want to get to is that, like all families, if you live long enough, sometimes there are good things that happen, and sometimes there are bad things that happen. And part of the process of being embodied in these bodies is that our minds and souls experience the ups and downs of life. And everybody in this room has been alive enough to have lost many different people and also welcomed many other people into the world. And we've also been fortunate enough to watch our own physical bodies change right in front of our own eyes. And to handle that with grace and dignity, for me, is a door into wisdom. And so that is what all of us at this point in our lives, wherever we come from, are doing. We all bring all our histories with us. We all bring our family history with us. We all bring our neighborhood history with us. We all bring our community history with us. And as Tony and I pointed out, we also bring our deep, deep family legacy. We bring from our family our first known relative from 1848. We have a photograph of him. It's very important. Can I have that book, Tony? Yes. This particular book has many of our photographs in it from our family, many of our times living in Goffstown, many of our experiences living in Goffstown. And this book is written about our family certainly, but it was inspired by an event that wasn't a tragic event, but it was certainly a world-changing event. In 1996, unexpectedly, our father died and blew the socks off of everybody. And it was like, wow. And for me, that was the first time I realized, as strange as this may sound, it was the first time I realized that death was real. I mean, I knew death was real. We had had pets that died. We had had relatives that we were told had died, and so forth, but I had never experienced death right in my face, and there was nothing I could do about it. So for 6 months after that, I worked it through, and we decided to commemorate that by writing a book about my father's life. And we got together, and over 6 months did it, and we wrote this book called Legacy: Portrait of an Ancestor. And there's my father, the dapper young man. And he was a graduate of, in 1944, of Dunbar High School in Arkansas. And Arkansas, Paul Lawrence Dunbar, by the way, was literally the poet laureate of the African American world in the 1920s to the 1950s. And both of my parents indirectly encouraged me to proceed as a writer. And so now that I've done it, and I've been on the planet now for 76 years, and I continue to write every day, a little bit. Well, anyway, what I'd like to close with is just the first couple of paragraphs from this book called Legacy: Portrait of an Ancestor. It's here in the library. We have some copies here, along with other work that Tony has done and so forth. But this is the description of what it was like that I recall, and of course all of our memories are filtered about that particular day. And my father is buried right here in Goffstown. That's where he wanted to be buried. And we visit his grave from time to time. Balloons drifted into the sky, red, green, yellow, and purple, floating over the tombstones and monuments on a winter's day in the first light of December. Below, the mourners gathered around a tent that shielded them from the sun. The closest of the family were around the casket, which was draped with multiple bouquets of flowers, echoing the drift and color of the balloons overhead. The plot on the ground, perfectly rectangular, held suspended above it an oak casket. Several feet away, in a line, stood 4 men in a military guard. In synchronized fashion, they shot off 4 rounds, a salute to the soldier who had come home. The smell of gunpowder thickened the air. The faces were sad, but not distraught. His children gathered around in their adulthood, the grandchildren in varying ages. His beloved wife, lover, and traveler for 49 years looked deeply, resolutely, and profoundly, and yet with hope, at the casket. After the salute, the soldier presented her with a flag folded precisely, neatly, in a triangle full and complete. After a crisp turn, they walked away. The crowd slowly began to disperse. Off in the distance, near the resting place of his oldest friend, Bob Shea, a lone balloon had come back from the sky and hovered around the monument. Everyone noticed it, and with a small smile moved across their faces. This gesture, this singular moment, was not missed on anyone. In the crowd, mourners began to cry, holding each other. The cars lined up along the road began to move away. Everything else, like elemental background music, slowly drifted into the surrounding area. Looking into the sky on this winter day, images and memories echo and reflect back over the years and over the generations. This was how, under the winter skies, one black man surrounded by friends in New Hampshire would gracefully re-enter the dark earth. It seemed like a long journey, one arched over the centuries and over the generations. How had this all begun? Untold eons ago, the roots of this man had moved deep into the soil of Africa. Distant relatives had known empires, wars, the fall of nations, perhaps the soul's dark retribution for excesses of the past. Names forgotten to history but remembered by eternity massaged and moved his spirit through time and over generations, over family histories and individual lives, and beached themselves in the Americas. In the belly of slave ships across the hell realms of the Middle Passage, the roots of the family had survived. Through the slave auctions, the lost identities, the broken teeth and backs and blistered skin, the deeper soul of this kinship consciousness held together and gathered strength. Through generations of slavery, wars of revolution, and civil strife, eventually his taken name, Bynum, reached the recorded pages of American history. A new chapter in an ageless saga had now begun. So that's how we find ourselves here today. And in a moment, I'm going to turn it back over to my brother Tony, but I'd like to introduce Tony for a little bit more. Tony, he also graduated from Goffstown High School in 1982. He attended the Hampton Institute, now Hampton University, in 1986. He did his master's work at Bowie State University and has had multiple careers in both casualty insurance and the Maryland Army National Guard. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tony. He's going to speak a little bit more, and then we're going to end it, and I hope people mingle, take advantage of the excess cookies that we brought, and have a good time. And again, it's a real treat and rush for me to see all of you and so many forces and faces here. Again, over half a century, faces and names and histories float up to me, and I can see them, and behind each is a history like my own. So it's important to remember that, as a great writer once said, Teilhard de Chardin, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Tony?
All right, Bruce, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me see where the rest of my notes are. Here they go right here. Okay, so as Bruce said, we're going to start wrapping things up. First thing I want to point out is we have some props that we brought with us, okay? And the props represent, as Bruce has indicated, history. Some neat pictures over here, some neat stuff. First, let's take a look at this one. I wanted to get a larger picture of it, didn't quite work out. Goffstown Covered Bridge, right? Now, I remember it because you could walk across it, but don't look down, right? So the bridge was actually built in 1901 by the Boston and Maine Railroad Company. But actually, it was a replacement for a bridge that was built in 1850 by the New Hampshire Central Railroad. The bridge was destroyed deliberately by fire in August 16, 1976. So everyone, it's a good time to check your alibis. Right? You can also see a poster from the Gaelic Society. Okay. Now, as a kid, I knew the Gaelic Society was a social club, right? My father and his best buddies, guys like Mr. Shea and Mr. Cunningham and Mr. Gamache and Mr. McKenna, Mr. Boyle and Mr. Healy, they would all hang out and do what, buddies did in those days. But what I didn't know was about these posters. I didn't know anything about them. Okay? And Stevie Shea found these somewhere. I don't know where they were, but he returned them.
Hold it up so they can see the
But he wanted to return them to the families.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's the way it goes.
I wanted you to see the old Bynum part of it, because you can't really see it.
Technical difficulties?
You want me to hold it up?
If you like. You can do the Vanna White, that's fine. Yeah, so Stevie found, I don't know where he stepped out. I don't know where he found those at. Oh, okay, so they were in the church basement. So maybe they were in a box. And maybe he said, I better do something about this. I don't know. There's a few others here I want to point out. Let's see here. Okay, this is a picture of, now all these are committed to the internet. Very smartly, people say, well, these records are important, let's save them somewhere. I pull all these from line. Now this is when my father, I was going to read this, he ran for the office, I think I already covered the selectmen, so I think I already covered that, right? So anyway, here's a picture. John Surratt, Mr. Wheeler, Mrs. Boyle. For years and years, Mrs. Boyle worked for the Goffstown cable access. Oh, by the way, Goffstown News, thank you for coming up to cover the event. I remember her because I would come into town, was it like the government channels, 19, 20, 21, something like that. She'd read the news. Mrs. Boyle, she's a staple at the parties. I knew all these people. You know what I mean? I knew everyone. There's another one I want to point out. This one's actually kind of interesting. Over here is, you would think, if you didn't know, you would think this would be devoted to the founder of Goffstown, John Goff. But actually it's not, okay? Actually it's not. Stevie helped me out on this. He sent me a link. There's a plaque, and it says, in memory of the men of Goffstown who served as soldiers and sailors in all American wars. It was erected in honor of Captain Charles Stinson by his grandson, Henry W. Parker, in 1916. So that's over 100 years old. I'm going to gather there's some group that's dedicated. You have these historical societies. There's probably their job to make sure that it's shiny and staying in good repair. Let's see. I think those are the main ones I wanted to cover. Yes. Yeah, those are the main ones.
Oh, show them the picture of you three.
Oh, yeah. I got to do that one. Okay, so 1976, okay. 1976, the bicentennial, okay? Big deal, Goffstown, big deal. So, this is Stevie, my neighbor, who I've known, I would think longer than any other person not named Bynum, okay? My very good departed friend, Kevin Kruger. and of course myself. We were Minutemen. And I remember marching because who was in charge? Was it a Jim Gage? He kept on my case because he said I wasn't marching right. And I was really getting mad at the guy. You know, it's like, 1, 2, is there, But anyway, it was a great experience. It was a great experience, and I'm glad that I did it. I don't know what happened to that hat, but okay. So those are the main things there. Now, Bruce talked a little bit about. So let's just take it from here. Okay. So as we wind down, there are a couple of additional but quick items to mention. The last but most important is the business of refreshments. Okay. Over there in the corner, there's some cookies for your enjoyment. Okay, it's very, very important to note that we Bynums don't fool around with the cookies. Okay, no bull jiving. All right, you can thank this person right here, my mom, because as a little boy, one thing she did, she made sure we got the good stuff. So, just putting it out there. Just putting it out there. All right, let's see where we're at here. Blah blah blah. Okay. So Bruce mentioned that the library has graciously allowed us space for some of our works, and please come and check them out. Please come and check them out. My first solo book was called No, It's Not a Shelter. It's called The Underground Economy, which is right here. Now at that time, I was working as a field representative in casualty insurance. My job was to track folks down for the insurance company I worked for. And so while I was out there, because the folks that we insured weren't necessarily trying to, cooperate, let's just call it the way it is. While I was out there, I would notice certain things, right? And I started to try to take notes about these things. So this book is actually about the economic decisions of disaffected people make in our society. Some folks, maybe they're people in and out of the prison system. Maybe they're people who are not citizens. Maybe they're the homeless. They're here. They're here. And they're here, they want to survive. So they make economic decisions. So it was observational research. And one thing about research is it may be factual, but it was not exciting. Okay? So what I wanted to do, Carol, can you hear me that one right there? What I wanted to do is I wanted another bite at the apple. Okay, so I wrote the second book. Yeah, that's it right here. That's it. It's just a placeholder. So the second book is called No, It's Not a Shelter. What I did in this, essentially, it's I guess they call them not a novel, but a novella, short novel, right? So I tell the same story, but we created a plot, we created characters. Okay, I'm going to read just a short paragraph from this. Okay, and again, this is available here. If you get the opportunity, please check it out. I'll just read the first paragraph. This is chapter 10, Cat and Mouse. It was 5:00 a.m. Helsinki time. The full moon from the prior night was giving way to the orange sun. Primo and Vincent were in the barn, milking old Elsie. Elsie was a milking cow for the family, and at one time provided enough food for 5 families. Those days were gone, but even at an advanced age, she was still productive. So that's a very small part of what the intrigue that's evolved. We went into different countries and that kind of thing. But basically, we had some fun with it. But it all focuses on decisions that are made for survival. That's the whole point of what those books are about. Okay, so as we wind down, thirdly, we're finishing up now. I did bring some courtesy copies of books. Some courtesy copies. If you would like them, I'll gladly sign them and give them to you if you'd like them, if you're interested. If not, no big deal. With that, we have a little time for question and answers, or if anyone has anything else they'd like to say, they're certainly free to. So Bruce, can you come up? And Bruce, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we finished up?
Not really. I mean, we've had a good time. You approached me with this about 6 months ago or a year ago. I said, it was good to me. So we kicked it back and forth, and we talked about it over the Zoom a couple of times. And so I had some loose notes, obviously, that I went with, and that was that. So what we'd like to do now, at least for a little while, is opening up. Some of you may have some questions about what some particular thing we talked about, or anything else, or some of you may know my probation officer, I don't know. Any other thing you want to come up with? Yes.
I was just wondering if you could bring up about your mom and how she works so hard, and like she's 98 years old, but she was a fantastic, fantastic nurse. We can all attest to that. Yes.
One of the things that I heard my entire life was your mom was there, okay? So that was my first experience, right? Your mom was there. The second experience was a hot water bottle, right? Your stomach's hurting, right? Hot water bottle, right? Vaseline fixes everything, okay? Yes, ma'am.
I have one question. Bruce, you mentioned that you folks felt that you were the first black family here.
That's probably not true, but the only ones
Well,
that
I
we
wondered
knew.
if Sam Smith was still here.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a teacher of mine in the 8th grade,
Okay.
and I knew he was
As far as I
around
know, he
somewhere,
was the first.
but they didn't have any other kids that I knew of,
No,
Oh,
they
no,
were much
they-
younger than you.
and they were younger. So we were the first sort of intact family with kids, and so that's what I meant by we were the first.
I remember having him too. So.
Yeah, they were here, but I meant people with.
They live in Boston?
Huh? I don't
Oh,
recall.
they lived in Goffstown.
Yeah,
I remember.
yeah,
Sam Smith and his
Kathy.
wife.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, I don't know what year they left, but they left and went up to Hanover.
Right, right. Anyone else?
Tell us about your father's, after he got out of the military, what he did for a living.
Well, when he got out of the Air Force military, he had been transferred to the New Boston Satellite Tracking Station. After he got out, he went into, he had a couple of different businesses in sequence, or I should say, employments. One of them, he worked for, what was it, WBZ in Boston?
Yeah, that was the longest.
That was the longest. And also, he had a television repair business, as I recall. So those were the two. Those are the two. And the other business he went into was something that he had picked up on and brought with him when he came to Goffstown. My father's father was a politician in Little Rock, Arkansas. And he was always interested in that. And then when he got to Goffstown, he saw the opportunity to actually enter elective politics. And so after being on the budget committee and a few other things, he actually went into public politics, and he won, and he served for a while. And then I picked up on that and ran a little bit because I was president of the student council in high school. And then when I was at University of New Hampshire, I ran with Brad Cook for the student council, and we won. No stuffed ballots either. We won. So that's what he did afterwards.
Very important point about the trip to Boston. My father made it, I think it was like every day, 50, 60 miles. It was my dad who discovered Subaru. So back in the early 70s, at 12 degrees, you could go to that car, which in those days cost $2,000, and it would turn over.
I don't know exactly what it was. I just knew he went to the tracking station and occasionally would bounce his voice off one of the satellites circling the Earth.
No, I mean WBZ.
Oh, WBZ? That I don't know. I just know he worked at WBZ, and that so that was as complex as it got for me.
He worked on the moon missions. Remember, he was in Guam.
Yeah, and he bounced his voice off of satellites. That's what a kid remembers.
What was his job at WBC?
Of this technician, he was in
Yeah.
New Boston tracking. Oh, at WBZ.
Is that what you're
He
asking?
still worked at WBZ.
Yeah, what did he do there?
Electronic track tracking. I can't remember.
Maybe it was a
Has
friend.
something to do with he wasn't in the studio until his last couple of years, but he was like at a tracking station.
He wasn't in the public side, he was more in the
Yeah, he
background.
was way back. He wasn't in the studio until
More
the
like a technician in the
because they used to
background.
meet him out there.
All I remember is his voice would bounce off of satellites and come back to Earth and have something to do with the moon. And there were guys getting ready to walk on the moon.
Yeah.
So,
Well, if there's nothing else or anybody else, I think we're pretty much all set. Thanks for coming, and feel free to hang around. And thank you, everybody. Yeah. You want to come up here, Mom? Okay. Well, I guess. Hold that thought. Hold that thought.
Well, I don't know how to use that thing. Never mind. I just wanted to thank all of my friends. What can I say? I'm overwhelmed. It's so much nicer to see you here smiling and then have to come and see me in another position. Thank you for being such wonderful people, such a wonderful neighborhood to live in, and most of all because you all radiate some kind of a love and care and concern for me and my family. So that's meant more to me than anything I can think of. So thank you so much for all your support these past, 65 years?
At least.
Yeah, we've been here 65 years. Wow. So I want you to know I see nothing but love. Thank you.